provide justice for the needy and the fatherless, uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute. Psalm 82:3.
John 14:18. I will not leave you as an orphan. I will come to you.
James 1:27. Pure religion and the undefiled before God and the Father is to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction and to keep himself unspotted from the world.
Matthew 19:14. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these."
2 Corinthians 6:18. And I will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty.
Galatians 4:5. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons.
Be able to share those awesome scriptures about being adopted. And, we're all adopted. All of us are, as children of God, we are adopted. And so in honor of that, we are actually going to start our singing this morning, singing Jesus Loves the Little Children. So please stand up and sing with all your heart. And there's 3 verses. Who knew? And we're singing all 3. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. All right, I need to stop just for 1 second because I'm sorry, but we have to sing this song my way. And my way means red, not and, but red, brown, yellow, black, and white. So let's sing it again. We're going to sing the second verse, and instead of and, we're going to sing brown. And I don't care what y'all think. I matter to Jesus, so I want to sing brown. Here we go. Jesus died for all the children, all the children of the world. Red, brown, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. We must pray for all the children, all the children of the world. Red, brown, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. We must help the little children, all the children of the world. Red, brown, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in his sight. We must help the little children of the world. Amen. Aren't we so thankful for all of our children here in this church? All right, why don't you join me now in seeing how deep the Father's love for us. God proves his own love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, Romans 5:8. If you want to open your hymnals, you can open them up to 101. Let's sing How Deep the Father's Love. How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he should give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure. his shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything. No gifts, no power, no wisdom. But I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer. But this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer. But this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom. If the ushers would come forward, please, as we collect our offering this morning. Father, I thank you so much that we have the opportunity to come this morning and worship you. And Lord, would we remember how deep, deep, deep your love is for us. And God, as we have an expression of thanksgiving, I pray that we would be faithful in our service to you, Lord, and that that you would take these offerings, Lord, and for the greater good, use it for that, Lord, and that you would be honored through it. In your name I pray.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
I didn't know my father. I was alone.
Helpless.
Helpless.
I had no family.
I didn't belong to anyone.
To anyone.
To anyone. I was an orphan.
No one saw me. No one knew me.
I was invisible. I was lost.
I was lost.
No one claimed me.
No one said, he's mine.
She's mine.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
I was hungry.
Like all the food in the world couldn't fill me up.
I was vulnerable.
Unprotected, at risk,
Cold, tired.
tired.
I thought I didn't matter.
I thought no one cared.
No one cared.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan. But I was found.
But I was found.
I was found. Someone stepped in.
Someone saw me. I was sought.
Pursued. Wanted.
Known.
I was an orphan.
But now I belong.
Now I belong.
Now I belong.
I'm embraced.
A sister.
A brother.
I know my father.
I know my father.
I know my father.
I was an orphan.
But I am loved.
At great cost.
I am restored.
I'm restored.
And for the first time,
I know that I am valued.
prized.
Forever.
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 I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
I was an orphan.
We're all orphans.
So I care for orphans.
So I care for orphans.
I was an orphan, so I care for orphans.
One thing he said in that video, he said, we're all orphans. How many of y'all were orphans? Every hand should go up, because that's all of us. Before we knew Christ, before he came in and saved us. We were all orphans. We were all lost. We were all slaves to something, to sin, to ourselves. But aren't you thankful that he came and saved us? That he adopted us into his family? That he changed our lives? So this morning, if y'all will stand back up as we sing a couple more songs. We can all identify. We can all relate to these. So just be thankful this morning for what he's done for you. That he's taken us in. That he's given us new life and new identity. Thank you, Jesus. With a melody, you surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. Now I'm no longer a slave to fear. Child of God. If you believe it, sing it out. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. Now I've been born again to your family. Your blood flows through my veins. Now I'm no longer a slave to fear. Child of God. Now I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Sing it out again. Now I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Sing that out over your life. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God. Aren't you thankful that we're not only saved from something, but we're saved to something? We've been saved to Jesus' love. We've been saved to His life, His freedom, because He loves us that much. Oh, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. 'Cause you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still in your love, love, love. Oh, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who Thank you, Lord, that you are a good, good Father. Thank you that there's nothing that we could do, nowhere that we could go, nothing that we could say, no mistake that we could ever make that would make you love us any less. Thank you that you saved us from our sin and from ourselves and from orphanhood, Lord, to be your sons and daughters. Thank you for saving us, Jesus. Help us to walk in that all the time and to remember that. Not just today on Orphan Sunday, Lord, or not just on any Sunday whenever we're singing, but in every day as we walk out our lives. As the lies try to come against us, telling us who we think we should be. Help us to know the truth and who you say that we are. Just to walk in that, Lord, today and every day. That is deeper than just something that we do, but it's who we are. It's who you say that we are. Show us that more and more each day, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. The children are now free to go to children's church.
Coming on, so there we go. All right, so each of these ladies has some experience in either foster parenting or orphan care. And so we wanted to give them a chance this morning to kind of share some of their experiences with you guys this morning. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask some questions, and they're going to kind of give their answers, okay? And so we're going to interview a little bit here. So the first question I have for y'all is just simply this. How did you know that the Lord was leading you to adopt? Whoever wants to go first. Sorry. Why don't you go first, Tracy?
Okay. Is mine on? Yes. Okay. No? Yes. Okay. I think for us, it was. I guess I can start off by saying, as an adult, a married woman, I didn't want to have children, and that caused a little bit of conflict there for a little bit. But as the time went on, and the Lord laid certainly a desire on my heart. It never occurred to me how the Lord was going to build my family. It didn't matter. I know as probably a middle schooler or a high schooler, I had this weird overcoming sense of me with this adoption thing. And so we started trying to have children, and that became a difficult process. And so from there, we just opened up every facet of the private adoption world, the fostering, international. We looked into all of it and tried to make ourselves aware of that direction, and just never felt any other pull but that to that way.
Our story was a little bit different. We were in school in Spokane, Washington. My husband was in missionary aviation program, and so we were surrounded by quite a few people that were already in the process of doing foster care, not just adoption, but just the foster care process. And so God began to lay that on our heart because we had been trying for children for over 5 years, and we already have one daughter who my husband adopted. She's my biological, but my husband adopted her as well. So God just started to lay that on our hearts, and he just put people in our path. Every day it seemed like when we had come to the point where, okay, God, if we're going to grow our family, it's really up to you. We're not able to do it the typical way. And so that's how that came about. And he just, again, put people in our path that began praying for us.
I think for us was a little bit different. We didn't have trouble having biological children. At the time, we had 4 when God called us to adopt. But I think God had laid it on our hearts long before. We talked about it when we were dating even. And I remember having those conversations. But then we had 4 kids and really put it on the back burner until, and I think we were going through the book Radical at the time by David Platt, and that really rocked our world. But I remember one Thanksgiving, and clear as day, I remember this moment, and I don't know why God used it, I just know He did. But we were walking into Target on Black Friday to do Christmas shopping because we had 4 children at the time. And there was a mama and a little boy walking out, and the little boy had Down syndrome. And at the same time, Tracy and I both looked at each other and said, when are we going to adopt? And we really hadn't had any conversations, I don't think, with each other as much as we were going through Radical. And it was, like I said, rocking our world. And we went from that to maybe January, February, to Tracy being at he was a campus minister at the time, and he was at a campus ministers meeting in North Georgia. And he texted me from there and said, hey, I've got this opportunity to lead a group of students to China over the summer, but I'd have to be gone for a month. What do you think? And my first question is, can I go with you? Because we had 4 kids again, and they were young. And he was like, no, you couldn't go. And so anyway, I said, go. I mean, I was like, man, that's an adventure. You've always wanted to go. It's paid for. Go. And so he did, but right before he left, he said, what do you think about special needs adoption? And that was not even on our radar, really. We didn't know anybody that had adopted, number one. Number two, we didn't know anybody that had special needs, adopted kids with special needs. Again, it was just God working on our heart in that moment.
And if any of you guys know Alex Clark, who's one of the local Chick-fil-A operators, he was with me on that trip to China. And I didn't know he was here. I got to go have lunch with him this last week, and we've kind of reconnected that. All right, so once you guys knew that God was calling you to adopt, what did the process look like from there? Give us kind of a brief summary on that. What did that process look like?
I think for us, for international, we were so backwards because Tracy went on that trip to China, and he actually met May on that trip. He was hiking one day, and he's down here waving. He was hiking one day, and the guide on the hike said, what do you guys think about visiting an orphanage? And of course, the wheels in Tracy's brain are turning because right before he left on this trip, we're talking about adoption. And so they went and visited an orphanage, but right before they went, she said, just to warn you, it's a special needs orphanage. And to preface that is a really tough place to go into. In a third world country, in a poor city, in a special needs orphanage is a very, very tough place to go. And so she was trying to warn them of that. But while they were on that visit, May was about a year old at the time, and he got to hold May. And so while he was there, he said, what are the chances of us being able to adopt this little boy? And they were like, it doesn't work that way. You don't go to China, pick your kid, come home, and start the adoption process. What you do is you apply for international adoption. The way the process is supposed to work is you apply through an agency to adopt, and China matches you with a child. You give parameters of what you would accept, boy, girl, special needs, not special needs, all those kinds of things, and then they match you with a child. But May was a little bit backwards in that process. But the process takes about, for special needs, about a year and a half, and it's about a $35,000 to $40,000 process.
I was really thinking at that time that I could probably narrow it down and say, okay, we're willing to take a little boy about this age that has like one little thumb digit on one side, but there really are a lot of kids like May over there, and so that really wouldn't have narrowed it down quite as much. What about the rest of y'all? What did the process look like?
Well, of course, the process for us was different because ours was domestic.
Right.
We did start initially with fostering. We were what was called a foster to adopt family. And, we too kind of had this idea of, okay, well, we only want this race or this age or these special abilities or not. And then once you get in on the process, you realize that, that's just out the window because there's so many awesome kids out there that are orphans that are looking for homes. And so what we did was our very first foster child was out of this parameter. He was a 7-year-old little boy. And we were told that we were only going, it was just for the weekend, that he was unadoptable and that he was going to be going into a group home. And so they just needed someplace for him to go because there wasn't a foster home in Madison County that would take him. And so Ryan ended up being our first adoption. And it's not for sissies, that's for sure. And thank goodness to my mom and dad back there and to my church family that we have made it to this point. Many of you know Ryan, it was tough. But shortly after Ryan, JC came home, and JC was 14 months when she came home. And I had actually met JC the day she came into foster care. I walked in for something else having to do with Ryan, and this woman came up to me and she said, "This little girl looks just like you. I mean, I cannot even believe, look at this little girl. You want to hold her?" At the time, I was pregnant with Liv, and I was like, no, I better not, just because you just attached to one more, But she did. She was super cute. And then later on, of course, she came to our house after we were blessed with Liv. And then shortly thereafter that, Alyssa came home. Alyssa was a private adoption from Florida. And again, that's another totally different process than the foster care situation. But I will say this, with all three of my adopted children, the best thing, if this is something that you've ever considered doing, or you know somebody that is we built relationships as much as we could with their biological mothers, and even a father in one situation. And that was helpful to me, and I definitely know for sure it was very healing for that mother, or the birth mother, birth father that was having to relinquish those parental rights. And those are relationships that unfortunately we don't have anymore. They kind of fizzled away. But that was one of the most wonderful things that, for 8 months with JC's birth mother in particular, we would meet and she would say, would you stay with JC and I today, during our visit? And, it kind of held me back. And it came to where every time she would visit, every week, every other week, she would ask me to stay. And I just felt like that was a pretty cool thing. And I had relationships with Alyssa's birth mother and with Ryan's birth father I had met.
So what does the process look like? I'm just going back through this after she's talked. We did foster care. Again, our plan was to do foster adoption when we started out. So there's different levels of foster care. You can be a respite care where you're taking care of them just for like weekends to let the foster parents have kind of a break. Then you have just foster care where you keep them maybe months to years until they go back to their permanent homes. And then there's foster care adopt, which our intention was to do adoption from the get-go. However, with that being said, you are never guaranteed that you're going to be able to adopt those children. You bring them into your home knowing that something could turn and they go back home to their biological parents. So for us, that was a little bit of a difficult emotional ride. Excuse me. We had 2 children in the beginning. They were asking for placement immediately. We didn't even have our license in the mail before they were asking us to take children into their home. And so we had a boy and a girl that came to our home, and within 2 weeks, the grandmother stepped up and was able to take them back to their home, which was great, but it was an emotional roller coaster for our family, especially for our daughter. Then came into our home, the way that we got our 3 children now is that they were again begging for homes and begging for placement. So we had just prayed, God, if this is really what you want for us, please open that door and make us know that it's for real. Because again, the emotional aspect of not knowing for sure if this is going to be the forever home is overwhelming, frustrating. Just there's a lot of adjectives I could add in there. But we had gone through many weeks of training to get to this point. When you foster care, it's not just like, bam, I'm going to be a foster parent. There's lots of training, lots of home visits, lots of, they really pick through everything about your whole life. We had to take our swimming pool out the back because we didn't have a gate to go around it. We had to have all kind of things that had to meet the criteria to be able to adopt or at least house these children. And once they came into our home, of course, there were difficult days. I'd like to say that we had a good relationship with their biological parents. We did not. From the get-go, they were very angry. They did a lot of things that, again, kind of tore up what we were trying to build with the children and just giving them security. So be prepared for that. There's a lot of grace found there from God to help you through that process. But once we got through the big hurdles, and about 10 months in, they told us, this is going to be the forever home for these kids. That's like, oh my gosh, really? Because again, your mind is still saying they probably aren't going to get to stay with us. And so once that happens, then they have to go through the process of severing parental rights, and they try to get the parents to willingly do that without forcing them to do that. And so that takes time. And once they do that, then it took us about 7 to 8 months, and where we finally completed our adoption March 24th, 2008. And so it's a pretty long, drawn-out process. So I would say to you that are interested in this, it's worthwhile, but it's a hard road. And again, it requires God's grace.
You've already touched on this a little bit, I'm sure, but you guys share what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and how God helped you get through some of those. Can I borrow that? I know I've got another one over here if you need it, since you're the resident crier.
I'm a resident crier too, just so you guys know.
I would say for us and probably these ladies also, is the unknown. It doesn't matter how much paperwork you have. It doesn't matter how many psych evals these children have had. When they come to you, the amount of trauma that they have experienced, especially those that have been in these traumatic situations for, year 4 on, it can be really rough, especially with these older adoptions. But for me, I would say that just the unknown. And, before you get into these situations, or you make a decision that you want to foster or adopt, just know your strengths and weaknesses, and make sure that, there is flexibility in your schedule. Make sure that you do have a lot of patience and grace to give. But the unknown, and these children, they have been through so much, and it's trauma no matter what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean they've had to be sexually abused or whatever. In our situation with our oldest, it was just neglect, It was just didn't know where his next meal would come from. Ryan moved out when he was 18, and he was still hoarding food under his bed because he didn't know if the next meal was coming or not, and he'd been with us since he was 7. So just the unknown.
You go next. To build off of that, she's correct. I mean, the unknown is so deep and wide, it's unbelievable. For us, I think, and I asked my husband this morning to kind of chime in with me as I prepared my notes, but the blending of the two families, you're totally different from the children that you're bringing into your home most of the time. I know my family, I know our behaviors, I know, what to expect when we have certain situations come up. You have none of that assurance when you have children come into your home. And so you have to learn to be flexible. You have to learn to expect the unexpected emotion that comes out of them, because they are truly traumatized. There's just so much embedded in them, especially for those that live in these situations in their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th year on up. If you get them as infants, you may not have as much to deal with, but when they've experienced some horrible, horrible things in their little lives, it's there, and it's going to be there probably till they die. It just depends on how they handle it and how much help you can get them. But again, it was for us learning to just day by day, not beating ourselves up about it, because we weren't perfect. We were learning just like they were learning to love us, and we were learning to love them.
I have a hard time narrowing down what one hardest thing was for us, international special needs adoption. I think probably the biggest glaring I can think of, other than, obviously you're adopting children who have been hungry and neglected, and there's so much that goes into all of that. We adopted one at the age of almost 14. So, there's a lot there. But I think for us, the hardest probably was financial. Just because we had never had a special needs child and didn't realize what that would mean for our family. When you adopt internationally special needs kids, I know in the States, if you adopt a special needs child from foster care, they come with insurance. They come with, I think, even a stipend. I hate to say they come with, that doesn't sound very good, but with something. But internationally, they don't. And so we had to navigate that world of a child that needed prosthetic legs, and they're $20,000 a leg, and insurance only pays this much. All of that. May's trying to show everybody his legs. So.
If you want to see him later, he's got him up here. We can even pass him around. And not every parent gets to say, "Put your leg back on, son."
That's what $20,000 looks like, right there. But how to navigate that. And as we got into it, adopting 2 more that had significant medical needs, within 2 years later, and I was working full-time at the time, and I was making good money, working full-time, carrying our benefits, and just really felt like, I have to resign. I mean, there's no way I can do that due diligence and do what God's called us to do with these children, due diligence. So I think financially for us, just trying to figure out, okay, how do we afford this? What do we do to make this work in our family? Just the medical, special needs are expensive, and insurance, like I said, covers only so much of that. And so I think that was probably the hardest, but there's a lot of hard internationally. You get a file for a child, and it could be right, it could be wrong. So I think it's just knowing your calling and know that God's called you to it. And I don't know. That's a hard question.
It's a hard question. There's not a whole lot about foster parenting or adopting that is easy. All right.
And there's not a whole lot that's black and white. I mean, I adopt a 7-year-old, you adopt a 7-year-old, you adopt a 7-year-old, and they're all going to be completely different from completely different backgrounds. And so there's no black and white in it either.
So if somebody wanted to help, right, not everybody feels led to adopt. And so for those, or foster, so those who don't feel led to adopt or foster, but they want to help, what are some things that they can do to help?
So I found a list online and just kind of put several lists together.
And this is in your bulletin?
This is in your bulletin. And so it says 10 ways you can make a difference. And I think this list that was done by Focus on the Family is really, really good. Becoming a foster parent, adopt, obviously. 153 million orphans in the world. Financially help a family adopt. I know, and I don't know what private looked like, but I know internationally it's about $35,000 to $40,000. Had we not had people come alongside us and help us, our children wouldn't be here. I mean, that was huge, because we were fundraising. There's all kinds of grants and things like that. So if you feel God leading you to adopt, don't let that number scare you, because there's so much help out there. Respite care. Did I say the word right? Okay, respite care is a big help. But there are also legal parameters you have to go through to provide respite care, especially in foster care. So you'd have to look into that one if God's calling you to that. I think these are the two big ones that are next, 5 and 6, wrapping around a family. And I love that image of wrapping around a family, just serving that family. Cooking, cleaning, driving, tutoring, babysitting. You're adopting internationally and probably even through foster care, because children are being moved from place to place. Their education is very limited. Their English may be very limited. So being able to wrap around families to really help, and even the biological kids may suffer. So we've got a child in school that struggles too, that's not adopted, that we've had people wrap around us and help with. So things like that are huge. And then just financially, just blessing others and with what God's blessed you with. So I think 5 and 6 on that list are two big, big ones. Mentoring, engaging your church, and then just praying. Because it's hard. It's a hard calling, but it's the most blessed calling, we've ever done. So
the greatest blessings come through the hardest things, right? And so it's definitely a hard thing. There's a list in your bulletin. If you're interested, you want to look at that. Wednesday night, you never responded. She's a text disser, by the way. She never responded to my text. Are you going to be able to help us out Wednesday? Put you on the spot. Okay. I like putting people on the spot. So Wednesday night during the Bible study hour, if you're interested in helping us brainstorm some ways that as a church that we can be more involved, then we're going to meet. We'll be upstairs in the Family Life Center. One of the rooms up there, I'm not sure which room, but if you want to join us and just kind of sit around and brainstorm, hey, these are some things that we could do as a church to get more involved in helping out with orphan care and fostering. There's a lot of good things. We had a great ministry at First Baptist Church on the Square that we called the Family Advocacy Ministry, and we called it FAM for short because I was in the Navy and I kind of like acronyms and playing with words, and so FAM Ministry, and so we may wind up with something like that here, to where we as a church can become much more involved in helping children and families in crisis. And so if you're interested, come back Wednesday night. You guys thank these ladies for coming and sharing.
May I add one more thing?
No.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. You're so sweet. I wanted to tell you that the last I heard statistically in Madison County, there were 8 foster families in Madison County. And there are maybe 40 or so, and if anybody knows anything different than this, please speak up, but 40 or so foster children. So that's a lot of kids per house. Yes. Well, let me talk to you about that afterwards, because that's a good question. But so with that, these children that come into foster care, they are not only split up from their siblings, but their siblings could go to South Georgia. They could go to Northwest Georgia. So that is something huge, too, that if you or you know someone who's interested in fostering. And then, two, with what Miss Shannon was saying, with what you can do to help, just listen. Don't offer your advice on how to parent these children. Don't judge them. Don't just listen to them, because a lot of times they just need you to listen. They don't need your advice. I promise you, if you've never been a foster or adoptive parent, it is not typical parenting, and you have no idea. And so if you don't listen, that is huge. Just let me talk to you. Just let these foster parents, these adoptive parents, just talk to you.
And I would add, just be their friend. I know with us and just what our family's been through in the last year, just having people step in and not ask us to talk about any of the hard, but just be our friend. We just need people to be our friend, and not have to go into the hard places to talk about. And if we want to talk about it, they're there for us to talk about it. But for the most part, we just need you to love us and be our friend.
And I just have one thing to add about what you can do. One of the things that's very much needed is being a CASA. If you don't know what that is, it's a court-appointed special advocate. And what they do is they go to court and they fight for that kid's rights. And when we were going through this whole process, I would have to go every month and appear in court where their parents would appear in court. And this person would sit there and say, wait a minute, we need this, we need that. And you can do that. It's a truly volunteered basis. And you can find out through your local DFACS office how you can be involved in that. But that is very much needed, because they're the ones that's going to make sure those kids get exactly what they need. And they make visits to the homes. And they're the voice of the child. That's exactly right.
That's right. Lots of ways you can help. Come back Wednesday and help us brainstorm with that. Y'all give them a hand for sharing this morning. Thank y'all so much. I just want to share. I've got a bunch of notes I was going to share too, but I have time, but I really feel like God's leading me to just share a story real quick and a couple of verses with you guys. Not sure where this is going to go because I didn't plan this, all right? So I may walk a little slower than I normally do through this, make sure I don't say something that I'm going to regret later. So I just want to share a story with you guys. I can remember getting back with Eli, and it was just hard. Like, Eli was an older child, and he was almost 14 years old, and so he was getting ready to age out of the orphanages in China. Once you turn 14, you're too old to be adopted, and their way of thinking, and so they take you off the list, and so they're no longer what they would say is adoptable. And so we get him at 13. He's right before he turns 14, and we bring him home, and I can remember days. There was one day in particular, I'm in my little prayer closet, and I'm just sitting there praying, and we had a rough first month or two with him. It was just really hard. And I can remember in my prayer closet praying and just crying out to God and saying, God, I don't know what to do with this. Like, he wasn't raised in my home. Like, if he had been raised in my home, then he would understand some of the rules and the way that we do things. But he's got all of these things that have influenced his life. This 13, almost 14 years of just culture and society that have poured into him. And it's not stuff from my home. It's not the way we do things. It's not the way we raise kids. That's not the way we talk. That's not, just all of these things that just were not the way that we do them in our family. I'm just crying out to God, saying, God, I just don't know what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? I tell him to do one thing, and he turns right around and he does just the opposite. Right? I show him how to do something, and it's like it goes in one ear and out the other. God, I just don't know what to do. And I remember sitting in my prayer closet, and I didn't hear an audible voice, but I knew what God was saying. God said, Tracy, I feel the same way with you some days. There's some days where I feel like I have to tell you the same thing over and over and over again. There's some days I tell you to do it one way and you do it another way. And sometimes I wonder if you're even listening at all. But I still love you. A verse that was on my heart this week was Jeremiah 1:5, and the Lord God said this to the prophet Jeremiah. He said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And I know he's saying this to the prophet Jeremiah, but God knows every single one of us just as well as he knew the prophet Jeremiah before you were ever formed in your mother's womb. God knew you. He knew every one of your little quirks. He knew every one of your faults and every one of your flaws. He knew every mistake you was ever going to make in life. and he still chose to love you. That's why adoption is such a beautiful picture of what God has done for us. There's so many parallels between what God has done for us and the process we go through to adopt orphans, and I'll share those, some of those with you tonight, along with some pictures that I've got to share. I'll share those with you tonight. If you want to come back to our Sunday night fellowship starting at 6:30, we'll be out here in the Family Life Center. Bring finger foods back with you so we can eat and fellowship. But I just want you to think about that this morning. In the same way, every one of these ladies shared stories about how Tracy even said that it's not for sissies, right? Well, God loving us is the same way. Like, we're no different. Every tough story that they shared today, every difficulty and every challenge that they shared when it comes to adopting a child, whether it's international, special needs, a child with different abilities. We don't call them disabilities, they're different abilities. Every challenge, they're no different than the challenges that God overcomes so that he can choose to love us too. See, God knows you. Like he knew you before he ever formed you in your mother's womb, and yet he still chose to love you. You think about that. Now, some of you may be a lot more perfect than I ever thought about being, but when I think about me, and I think about all of my faults and all of my flaws and all the things that I've done throughout the years that were just flat out goofy, and I wonder, man, how in the world could someone ever love me after doing something like that? You think about that in your own life, and you realize that God loved you in spite of that. He knew you were going to do that. You were going to be that way. He knew Peter was going to deny him and turn his back on him. Knew Judas was going to betray him. He knows you and everything about you. One last thing about adoption, and I'll share more on this tonight. Older child adoptions. In older child adoption, a child has the option. They're old enough at that point to really kind of make their own decision, and they can kind of help make the choice whether or not they're going to be adopted or not, so they have a choice to make. Right? When someone comes to adopt them, they can choose at that point to say, no, I don't want to do that. So they can reject that and say no to the adoption, to the family that's coming, wanting to receive them into their family. You know, you can do the same thing with God. You know, God offers every single one of us the opportunity to be a part of his family. Every single one of us. But not all of us will actually accept his offer. Eli would tell us horror stories about friends that he had in the orphanage, that someone would come. I mean, Eli saw the family come in. They're coming to adopt his friend in the orphanage. And all of a sudden, they go away to be with the family, and then next thing he knows, they're back. And he's like, what happened? And they're like, well, I couldn't do it. And he would tell us about the regret that those kids lived with the rest of the time he knew them. Just regret. Like they had an opportunity to belong to a family, and they turned it down. They chose to stay where they were. Every single one of us has the opportunity to be a part of God's family. And the way that we become part of God's family is that we believe in Jesus. That's what the scriptures tell us. That if we will believe in him, we shall not perish, but have eternal life. Believe in Jesus. And that's not just something that we do with our minds, it's something we do with our lives. Right? We choose to trust Jesus with our lives and love Jesus with our lives. That's what it means to be a believer in Jesus. So it's not just something we do up here. We trust him and love him with the lives that we choose to live. All of us have the opportunity, and I know that not every one of you are going to receive Jesus into your life. Some of you may go through life just rejecting Jesus and saying no. But I want you to know this morning, we all have the opportunity to belong to God's family. So as we get ready to close, Jillian's going to come back up, and we're going to sing. I think the whole praise team is going to come back up, and we're going to sing one last song. And as we're singing, and this is your opportunity to respond, and I want you to think about that this morning, that every single one of us, God knows us. He knows us. And we have the opportunity to know him. And not just to know him, but to make him known. The opportunity is yours. It's sitting right in front of you today. You have the opportunity. If you're not already part of God's family, you have the opportunity to be a part of God's family today. So as we sing this song, I'll be standing here at the front to talk with you and pray with you if you need to make a decision today. Maybe you're ready to become part of God's family. You come. You say, Pastor Tracy, I'm ready. I want to become part of God's family. You come and share that with us. Some of you may need to become an official part of Moons Grove Baptist Church and become part of the Moons Grove family. And if that's you, you come this morning and tell me, hey, we want to become an official part of what God's doing in and through His bride here at Moons Grove Baptist Church. So you come and share that with us. As we sing, however you need to respond today, this is your time. Do business with God. Get things right. If you need someone to talk with you, I'll be standing here. Let's stand together and sing as we sing our song of response.